Happy Juneteenth, everyone. My name is Angela Walton, and I am the virtual assistant for the Community Investment Network. I think I can safely say good afternoon, as this virtual webinar has participants in at least 3 time zones. I pray everyone is safe during these pandemic times, and what we know as persons of color is that we persevere in all times. Thank you for joining us today for our discussion entitled Let Freedom Ring. We will be celebrating the voices of Black men and demonstrating how collective giving can be used to support and strengthen Black boys and men. I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping items so you know how to participate in today's event. First, we want you to interact during today's webinar. If someone shares information that resonates with you, please use the chat feature to share. Also, you can submit questions to our panelists. And to do so, just type your question in the Q&A panel, and please use the hashtag #WeArePhilanthropists. Also, I would like to take this time to introduce the Vice Chairman of the Community Investment Network. He will be moderating our presentation today, and I'm so excited to tell you about Terry Love. He serves as the Vice Chairperson of the Community Investment Network and is currently serving as co-director of the EDGE curriculum. He's an alumna of Duke University and is currently a senior consultant in change management at CI Consultant. There he supports global clients with an emphasis on change management and process improvement in industries in North America, Europe, and Asia. With his professional expertise as a change agent, his civic engagement and board service focuses heavily on transforming and improving communities and civic engagement. He is a former member of the Birmingham Change Fund, one of the co-founders of REAP, which stands for Real Engagement Through Active Philanthropy. This is a men's giving circle in Phoenix, Arizona. And Terry also has a personal goal of educating and engaging Black donors across the country about the power and results of collective philanthropy. We're so glad to have all of you today. I want to hand this over to my friend, Terry Love.
Thank you, Angela. I promise you, you make me sound a lot better, and I feel like I really am. But good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are excited to have today's Friday session, which is part of our Photo Fridays. And these sessions have been a space that the Community Investment Network has tried to carve out in the recent climate to make sure that the voice of the Black philanthropists in America is being heard about the work that they're currently doing and the work that must be done in our communities to service our citizens. So just really quick, this day happens to fall on Juneteenth, which is one of my favorite holidays in America. And I just wanted to give a quick overview or background of what the actual holiday is. I know many of the people that are on this call already know and understand Juneteenth and the importance of it for our community, but with the resurgence, I would say, of what's now and attention that's being brought to this date, I want to just give a little bit more background to it. So today, as we celebrate Juneteenth, many of us here celebrate this day and recognize it for its historical importance as descendants of those who were enslaved after being carried to these shores by way of the Middle Passage. But for those who don't know or aren't as familiar, here are a few important notes to help us understand why it's such an important day for this nation. Juneteenth is the oldest nationally celebrated commemoration of the ending of slavery in the United States. On June 19, 1965, Union soldiers, which were led by Major General Gordon Granger, landed in Galveston, Texas, with news that the war had ended and enslaved people were now free. The importance of this note is that this news came 2.5 years after President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, which had become official on January 1st, 1863. Juneteenth represents, in many ways, the ways in which freedom for Black people has historically been delayed. While this declaration marked the end of slavery, it is exactly relevant as to why the way our society operates today. It also ushered in the beginning of a system of oppression, divisiveness, and it continues to have negative impacts in the Black community of America today. For so many Black communities, the delays and hurdles to equity and inclusion are obstacles that are upheld by antiquated systems and policies. It's a reminder that nobody is free until everybody is free. As for the challenge of honoring this day as a holiday, on January 1st, 1980, Juneteenth became an official state holiday here in the state of Texas through efforts of state legislator Al Edwards. That successful passage of a bill marks Juneteenth as the first emancipation celebration celebrated by official state recognition. In 2014, it finally became a national day observance with the personal support of then President Barack Hussein Obama. This day celebrates African American freedom and achievement while encouraging continuous development and respect for all cultures. It takes on a more national, symbolic, and even global perspective because the events of 1865 will never be forgotten. Hashtag never forget. Hashtag all freedoms matter. So today, we have the honor and privilege of sharing with 5 incredible Black men from across America who are leaders in their respective communities. They're leaders in their expertise, in their professions, and they've come to this conversation because they're Black men who have made the conscious decision and the commitment to use their time, their talent, their treasure, and in this moment, and most importantly, the truth of their testimony by using their voices and their collective action for their communities. If you can come on camera as I bring you on. So joining us today, we have Dr. Anthony C. Hood, a member of the Birmingham Change Fund and a former member of the CIN Board of Directors, my friend. We also have Mr. Jason Gillette, the current chairman of, which stands for Real Engagement Through Active Philanthropy in Phoenix, Arizona, and it's a personal bias that's my favorite giving circle in the state of Arizona. We also have Dr. Isaac Ade, founder of the 260 Change Fund and thought leader of Conscious Conversations in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm not sure if he's joined the line yet because he had another meeting right before this, but we also will have Mr. Brandon Bruce of Denver, Colorado, who is currently co-chair of the Denver African American Philanthropists. That giving circle holds the honor of being the first Black men's giving circle in the West. And someone who I learned so much from with every chance we get a chance to connect is Mr. Ken Perry of A Legacy of Tradition, which is a giving circle in Raleigh, North Carolina. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. I am excited to have you all here and hear your voices in this moment. If there is something that I can start this conversation with, this is going to be one of those moderated but mostly casual and candid conversations, hopefully. I want to start this conversation with the daunting question that many of us are asked in day-to-day lives as Black men that has to be glossed over, but how are you? How are you in this moment? I did want all of our participants to be able to answer this question because I want this space to be able to say how we actually are, be it we're happy because it's Juneteenth, we have 2 days to our birthdays, that's me, or we're excited because of the momentum, or we actually carry a burden with us right now. So I wanted this space to be able to actually express what that is right now. So Dr. Hood, you mind? I'm going to go ahead and start with his, how are you? And we'll come back and circle back to you.
Terry, thanks for having me. Marsha, Angela, everybody. I appreciate being able to be on. And one point of correction, I'm not doctor yet, but coming soon.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Isaac for now.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem at all. I'm glad you asked that question. I'm hanging in there. I'm trying to survive in this time. It's been tough, though, because of COVID, because of everything that's happening with protests around race, shifting school online, having a third grader online. It's been challenging, but I've been focused on health, and that's helped me get through.
Thank you. Jason, do you mind sharing how you are?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm doing okay. I think that Isaac's point, there's a lot going on, and it's layered and compounded on each other. And so I think that the stress of just being in this moment, being present or trying to be present in this moment can be taxing. And so I think that I'm doing fine. I know that this is an interesting space for all of us. And so I'm eager to hear how I can learn more about whatever everyone else is doing.
Dr. Hood, are you with us yet? So I'm going to move on to Mr. Ken Perry. If you can join in, let us know how you are in North Carolina today.
I am great, and I'm feeling pretty powerful. That I know it's been a lot of unrest and a lot of things happening, but I'm so excited that we're having this conversation and that we are confronting the different things. And I've been talking with a lot of different folks all around the country as well as in my own community, and they are struggling some, but also extremely excited about the changes that have already occurred and the changes that we are forecasting.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and move on to, I guess, the next question. And part of that, how are you? The reason that I ask that is because within each of our spheres, we represent our families, we represent our workplace, we represent our giving circles. That question of how are you in this moment, when we look at the news and we see events that impact us as Black men on a level that's not just something that, oh, the grass is green today, we still have to carry that as well as carry out the actions that we have on a daily basis, or how it shapes what we do within that moment. So I'm excited to hear the language of this is a powerful moment, or I'm excited to hear I'm good or I'm okay. And so hearing that, I think it's important that we as Black men make that effort to ask how we are, but also understand that it's okay to not be okay. I started this conversation, or the desire for this conversation, of hearing the voices of Black men because that mission of not being okay in this moment is not one that comes out very often. So the reason, like I said, I wanted to ask that question and hear from you all was to be able to allow that space to be voiced. The next question I wanted to ask, and I do want to do a slight rewind, the next time that I direct a question to you, if you can give us a little bit of background about who you are, the space that you represent professionally, as well as what your giving circle is and the work that it's currently doing in that space and how it might pertain to the question that I have. But the next question that I had was, knowing the power of the voice that you bring to the community, what areas have you or your giving circles focused on with this climate, and how has it been met by your community? So Mr. Perry, if you could just give us a little bit of background of what A Legacy of Tradition is currently doing, or what you're doing personally, either professionally or with your giving circle. I'd like to hear your voice.
I appreciate that. A Legacy of Tradition is a giving circle that we really focus on how we can impact Black men and Black boys in the community. And one of the things and we've been around since 2006, and one of the things that we know that when it's trauma happens, which we all experience, that we have to have a way to kind of get that out. A lot of time we kind of keep a lot of that in, particularly us Black men. We have to be tough for so many different folks, as well as being able to teach our young folks how to manage and handle things. So one of the things that we're doing as we try to think about our last planning session, we thought about what might be the most important things or important person in your community. And a lot of times we think about when we vote or whatever like that, it's for the president. But we realize that the most important person is that district attorney who makes a lot of discretionary decisions, whether you go to court, whether to charge or not, whether to reduce your charge. And we kind of never kind of think about that. We talked about how in Ferguson that they had like almost 70% of the population of Black, and they never knew they could select who their district attorney should be. So anyway, by that changing and by realizing you're having that power, you don't have to be oppressed. So that's one of the things that we're thinking about doing as we leading up to the voting is what impact that we might have to kind of educate folks about the district attorney and bringing them to the community and to having some conversation with them so they can kind of educate themselves about who they might need to even vote for. The other thing that we're doing as part of our Giving Circle, and also every year we sponsor the Fatherhood Conference. We've been doing that for about 7 years now, and this year hadn't been able to have it because of the pandemic. But one of the things that we started for June, because it is Father Day, in June, is starting having a conversation every Friday. We call it the Fatherhood Engagement, and it's a Friday series. So from 12:15 to 1:15 every Friday, we have a topic that we talk about different things. And one of the things that was so powerful is that we had several mothers who called in who have young kids, and they started talking about all the things that's been happening and their kids been viewing, and about the rioting, about what happened to Mr. Floyd. And just before we did the last series, the issue that just happened in Atlanta. So they had a lot of anxiety and talking about they seeing that with their kids. So the series last week was about how do you talk to your kids about all of the trauma and everything that's going. So we were able to provide some real useful information to the mothers, and then so the community really is engaged around that particular issue. So it's so present all the time. So that's also the exciting part too, that they're able to get access to some resources to talk about these sort of issues.
Thank you. But with that, I also wanted to see, Jason, is it possible for you to share what's happening within REAP in the same space, knowing what areas you have or your Giving Circle is focused on during this climate, and how has that been met by your community?
Oh, thank you, Terry. So REAP, Real Engagement Through Active Philanthropy, this year it's been a whirlwind. So when the first part of COVID-19 started to break out and we saw that there was a disproportionate impact to the African American community, our first initiative was to partner with our other African American Giving Circles here in Arizona to put together a collaborative grant. And so we were successful in doing that initially, and was able to get out $70,000 into our community within a short period of time to help with things like PPE and helping to reopen safely and testing. And so we responded to the need based on what the community has voiced. And so what we're looking at now with the social injustice issues is that we're going back to the community to see what the prevalent needs are. Is it voter education? Is it developing businesses and reinvesting in communities? Is it an opportunity for us to leverage schools and use that as a tool to look at long-term strategies for improving our community? So some of the things that we're looking at and we're trying to fund and trying to intervene on are basically the needs of the community as we've seen them. And so in Arizona, since African Americans are very spread out and very small percentage of the population, we do run into challenges in looking at how do we address the needs of a dispersed population that is also underrepresented statistically and also in any geographical area. And so we've maneuvered these things effectively, but again, there's always challenges to looking at gaps in service, especially in our poor communities where there's no access to care or very limited access to care. So there's a lot of things that REAP is doing as an African American Giving Circle for Men to kind of reinvest and redefine what giving looks like. And then also looking at what kind of innovation can we do to create a new form of giving and a new way to give that will have both long-term and short-term strategies. And so we've been working, and I think that to every other Giving Circle, I'm sure in this time, it's been a juggle. And so I'm just looking and seeing exactly where the needs are. And as they rise to the top, we try to make those our priority as we can.
Great. Sounds like you all have great leadership. But I did want to take a quick moment to pause and welcome and bring in my brother, Javon, who is also one of the leaders within Denver African American Philanthropists. I'm excited to see you here. I think that there was a problem with Brendan joining us, so I appreciate you stepping up to the plate. I think that's something that we as Black men find ourselves doing, seeing a need and coming to it. So thank you for joining us and welcome. That's intentional. So I was going to have a perspective from DAAP letting us know what was happening in that area, but for time's sake, I do want to go on to the next question. So as you can join in with conversations, please let me know. The next question.
Chair, I just want to do a mic check. Can you hear me?
The next question I did have, though, was from an experiential standpoint, what, if anything, do you see that is happening differently during this time? I say that from the aspect of, were there previously hurdles that are now receiving attention, or is there something that, because of this climate, it now seems as though the work that you were previously doing is even that much more cumbersome or hard? And I asked that question directed at both Dr. Hood and soon to be Dr. Ade. I know the work that each of them are doing that is outside of either their professional spheres, that is their community base. I know Isaac has a conscious conversation that he sponsors and does for the Nashville community. And I know Dr. Hood is very integral with community development and bridging that gap that exists in Birmingham. So just from each of you, for your perspectives, what, if any, hurdles have either come up or surfaced, or what barriers have been broken down because of this current climate? So, Isaac.
Yeah, I don't mind chiming in, and just to let you guys know, everything that I'm doing in Nashville, I'm modeling it after what Anthony's doing in Birmingham. So he's my inspiration. I'm in an academic space, I'm in a community space, and I'm in a philanthropic space. What I'm seeing is an unprecedented response and action from private sector organizations to get engaged on this particular issue of racial disparity. It's really interesting to see, having worked as an engineer in the Fortune 100 world, being in an academic space now, companies have talked a lot about doing things. Now they're doing things and putting money behind it and putting action behind it. From a giving circle perspective, we started 260 Change Fund to advocate for the Black community in Nashville and drive philanthropic dollars towards community initiatives. And we've gotten a lot of response from private sector organizations who are interested in supporting the efforts behind our fund. When I think in the past, it was something that they saw us doing, but now it's, hey, we really want to help. So things have just shifted on a dime, which to me is kind of surprising because we've been talking about this stuff for 400 years. But anyway, we're here, we're going to take advantage of the opportunity and do what we can.
Awesome. Thank you. Dr. Hood?
All right. Good afternoon. Y'all hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Good to be with you brothers today, and good to see Isaac. Isaac and I are affiliated with an organization called the PhD Project, and I think that's important because when you think about the time that we're in right now, sure, we're giving circles, and the treasure part is really important. But I think with the Birmingham Change Fund, what we're realizing is that talent piece and that testimony piece is so important. And I think what we're seeing from our circle is that people are actually bringing a lot of thought leadership around what's next. A lot of our white colleagues are now literally waking up to what we're talking about. Isaac just mentioned that. And like I said, it's been hundreds of years. We had Eric Garner, who we saw on camera being killed via chokehold. He said, "I can't breathe." That didn't, pull at the heartstrings of people like what happened with George Floyd. And a lot of us are scratching our head like, what's the difference between George Floyd and Eric Garner? We may never know, but we're here now. And so I think what we're seeing now is a lot of leaders in the corporate space, elected officials are saying, I get it now, I get it. And I don't want to be a part of the problem, I want to be a part of the solution. And so I think because Birmingham Change Fund is one of the more mature, giving circles, and really in this area, I think a lot of people look to us to say, okay, how can we help? Because we know that you guys have been in the communities. You speak the language of the community, but you also speak the language of corporate. I think we're in a unique position because the mayor of the city of Birmingham is one of us. He's a member of the Birmingham Change Fund, also a Morehouse man. Ed Fields, who is his chief strategist, is also one of the founders of the Birmingham Change Fund, and also was there at the beginning of the founding of the Community Investment Network. We also have Lord Watson, which is one of the early founders of BCF as well as CIN, and he's launching a new foundation called the Penny Foundation, which is modeled after one of the first and largest African-American banks in the state of Alabama at the turn of the 20th century. And we have Marsha Morgan, who's also one of those founders of BCF and CIN, who is the chair of the CIN network. And so we have all these people who we literally kind of grew up together when we were in our 20s, and now we're not in our 20s. And so we put in the treasure, but now we're recognizing that we can put in the talent and the testimony as well. So we have a lot of our colleagues that are reaching out to us and saying, hey, how can we best deploy our funds? And although we got a little money, they got a lot more money than us. So what we realize is that, yes, we're going to continue to deploy our treasure, but how can we come alongside them and maybe tap into some of these, 6, 7, 8, 9-figure types of accounts that we can direct those funds to where they need to go in our community so we can see the change that we like to see.
From what I got from what you said is that we need to put our money where our mouths are, pretty much. And I do appreciate, as Isaac pointed out, Dr. Hood and the learning that I've gotten from Birmingham Change Fund and Community Investment Network, and how I've been able to personally operate in this space of philanthropy and in civic engagement has had a tremendous amount to do with those people that he listed off and that they've had a chance to introduce me to. So the voice that I have has been empowered by so many of those that have come before me in this space or that are currently in this space with me. And so I celebrate that today because for so long our voices have been there. Anthony pointed out something very pivotal. What's so different now that Eric Garner was not as much of an outrage as it was for George Floyd, and it took that many more years or that much more time or those many more hashtags for this to come to this space. But to the point that Isaac just said earlier, it happened. So let's take this and run with it because we're not going to let this momentum just roll into. So thank you for each of those contributions to this conversation. I really do appreciate hearing what your experience is in this space. I did want to ask, and this was one of the things that I know that you have guarded in mind, so I'm just going to ramp up this question so you understand where it's headed since you weren't a part of the planning on this. But how is it in each of your giving circles or in each of your personal lives, you're preparing or equipping yourselves for this work that you're about to undergo or take on? Is it from an aspect of educating yourselves about what your community needs? Is it a matter of understanding what you need as a person to better equip yourself for the work that needs to be done? I need to be more educated. I need to recognize the trauma that's been on me. Any of those things and anywhere in between. And how are you putting that into play or action as you carry on your conversations with your circle members, your foundation members that are your partners, and the community members that are either being funded by you or that you're giving your time and talent to?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, were you kicking that to me or to Isaac?
To Javon.
Okay. Yeah, so I think just to briefly touch on your previous question and going into this question, I think we're at a time of great interest convergence, right? We're faced with a global pandemic that's disproportionately impacting African Americans. And then on top of that, we're seeing Black men and women killed in their homes, in the streets, jogging, just everywhere. And so I think the interest convergence of Black people, and I think we're seeing liberal white people as well, wanting to make a change. Like when you talk about education or how we're preparing ourselves, I feel like we have all of the education we need because we have the experiences of being Black people in America. And so in our circle, we're pulling directly from those experiences to begin to outline our strategies forward and the action that we want to take. I mean, just, within the last 24 hours, the Denver DA announced that she wouldn't be filing charges against an officer who killed a man in Denver, William DeBose. And so that's something that just kind of further fuels our action. And we've had some very intense conversations. We decided to infuse $25,000 from our fund in this cycle to begin addressing some of the systemic issues that we're seeing. And we're really happy because today on Juneteenth, our host foundation announced the formation of the Black Resilience in Colorado Fund, which we plan to make over $1 million this year in grants to Black-led and Black-serving organizations. And we were one of the initial partners in that effort as well. And so we are lifting each other up. We're like doing things like securing masks to give out in the community. Those are some of the things that our members are doing. And I think that we find healing in the work that we're engaging in.
Awesome. I mean, we can just end the conversation right there. No, I'm joking. No, but that is amazing. So for me, on a personal note, to hear just the success of seeing DAAP be a part of that conversation, not only in what your actions are, but in your partnership with your host foundation and being a voice of how that action is happening. So I've, in many conversations, pointed out, yes, it's one thing to act, it's one thing to make a seat at the table and have a voice at that table, but do you have direction at that table? Can you say, yes, hi, I'm here, oh, we'll be quiet, sit down, this is what the grown folks are doing? Or is it, hi, I'm here, this is what you need to do, because if you don't, I can guarantee you it's not going to go the way that you need it to go, and they've listened to you. That becomes the question and the celebration that I see in this moment, in this time of, we've been saying this, we've asked you nicely, we're still nice about it, but we're serious about it, so we're going to do what we're going to do. It's kind of the mode that I've personally taken, like, okay, I've tried. Okay, we're doing this though. Okay, you're not on board, but I didn't say we weren't going to do it because you're not on board, we're doing it. So that's kind of where I'm at personally. I do want to ask Jason, on a personal level, how do you address this or equip yourself for this work on a personal note, both within your giving circle, but even just in your everyday, day-to-day?
That's a really good question. From a giving circle perspective, with all of the uncertainty that's happening, it is stressful. And I've always defined stress as not the presence of a problem, but then just the absence of a solution. And so when we're in this level of uncertainty and this constant flux, right, I think that we're trying to address the needs of our community, but they are ever changing. I mean, every week there's another need that emerges that is different than what we originally thought. And so because of this constant shift and the time sensitivity to get these funds and these interventions out to the community can be stressful. And I think that it's layered upon everything else. Again, COVID-19 and the civil unrest, the poor economy, concerns about leadership. And so there's a lot of different things culminating. And personally, I wake up and it's almost surreal. You wake up and you feel like you're in Groundhog's Day in some regard, because it's just the exact same thing. You're quarantined in your house, or at least I am, and you don't go anywhere. And so you manage these issues isolated. And that's one of the greatest challenges for mental health, and even just for our own well-being is that community and that connection. And when you separate that, or if you isolate that from people, you start to see that we have some very serious effects that are plaguing our community, Black, white, Hispanic, and the like, because substance abuse, domestic violence, just unemployment. There's a lot of different things that are taxing us as a society and as a people, and then you couple that with, again, the pandemic and social unrest and everything else, it doesn't make sense that anyone can be sane, I guess, in this moment. And so taking the time to acknowledge that this is really quite serious, and we're looking at history right now. And so being able to acknowledge the fact that we are standing in the middle of history, both from a global pandemic that we haven't seen in almost a little over 100 years, civil unrest and the social justice work that hasn't been seen since the 60s and probably is exceeding that in regards to scale. There's a lot going on, and being able to acknowledge that and say, this is stressful, is the first step in regards to managing how we move through these events of 2020. And so personally, mindful meditation, walks, I'm not much of a runner, but Terry will help me run one of these days. But I try to do what I can to just stay in my routine, and then also ensure that I have people to connect with. And so we at REAP have created these virtual happy hours. And so it's an opportunity for our members just to connect virtually. And it's actually been really helpful and very successful in regards to getting a chance to just talk. It's almost like that barbershop talk in a sense. And we've really tried to keep that level of continuity in our circle, so that way we don't lose our members or lose the energy and the drive to continue to help. Because being a philanthropist in this moment, when the economy again is at its place where uncertainties are everywhere, being able to give in this space is really commendable. And I think that we should all be giving our members and all of the other organizations that are still giving, especially when scarcity or resources are scarce. This is an amazing moment. And so I think that being mindful of our mental health and the current situation that we're in is important. And then also giving with patience and also giving with purpose it will be critical as we move forward, and hopefully make some serious change in America as a result.
Awesome. Thank you. So I do want to leave room for questions and answers. I know that there is that space built into our time today. I don't know if there are any in the chat, so if there are, Marcia or Angela, if you could bring them forward to me. But to wrap up the questions that I have for the panelists before we get into any questions that were there, you bring up the importance of understanding stress. You mentioned the importance of taking that time to have that voice of your current membership of Giving Circle members to not lose that momentum. My question would be to all of the panelists here, what are you finding that's become your most motivation during this time? So is it you have a niece or a nephew that looks at you and you see that smile and you say, that's what it is? Is it your dog? Is it the fact that you still haven't finesse the heck out of that flambe? What is it that gives you that, you know what, I'm going to smile and keep moving today? So, Isaac.
I have to say, I'm inspired and motivated by quite a few things, but one that probably stands out the most is just the promise for the future of our community. When I really think about where we have an opportunity to go as a Black people in America, inspire, and I draw a lot of motivation from that. I will say, though, people like myself and others in the Nashville community that have kind of been those leaders out front, we've been suffering from quite a bit of compassion fatigue. And our conversations are, how do we work smarter, not harder, understanding that there's still work that needs to be done, but we can't burn our candle, to try to light the entire community. But we are inspired and hopeful about where things are moving, and we seem like we have an opportunity to really affect change. But we're just trying to make sure we do it in a much smarter, sustainable way going forward.
Awesome. Mr. Perry?
I think, like Isaac mentioned about, one of the real cool things about CIN and the Giving Circle, it's early on, one of the things our Giving Circle did is really kind of did our homework for us, educating ourselves about what the Giving Circle is. And then, and knowing that to be the most impactful, it has to be by design. That, you got all these different parts and you can't solve all the world's problems, So you have to focus, and then you have to know what your impact is. So that's been the most reassuring thing, I think, for me, to know that if I do focus, if I figure out how I can have the most impact, it's going to be bigger. And you know, one of our giving circles is the Warrington Quilters. So I always think about them, and I always go back to my wife's grandmother. Whenever I went to the house, she had all of these patches everywhere, and you look at it and you say, what in the world is going on? And then a few months later, when I get back there, it's this quilt that's splendid and magnificent. So all of these different pieces had a purpose. And so that's what's really encouraging, because you know, people see sometimes all of this as chaos, but a lot of work is going on in each one of those communities, and you seeing it that something lit a fire and is across the whole world, that people are saying enough is enough, and they're trying to do some things on purpose. So I see all of the chaos, if people's calling that, as those different patches, and they're going to come together, and as long as we don't have other folks tell us how to address issues or how we protest or how we do things. You know, they tried to tell Kaepernick how he should protest. So we just have to keep in mind that all of those are those little patches, and it's going to come together in a nice quilt at some point, and we just have to keep plugging. So anyway, I'm so encouraged about that. I mentioned earlier about how we're having the fatherhood series and having the different folks and some of the young folks who join and talk about their vision, what's going on, and how this have made them rethink and refocus has been inspirational to me.
Awesome. I did want to ask, there are a couple of questions that came up. So before I turn this back over to Marsha, I did want to do a few things for housekeeping. The first question was, and I'm from the question, I'm going to probably ask Dr. Hood to answer this. How can organizations that are not Black-led support Giving Circle work?
I said, cut the check. I say that in jest, but I say that seriously. You know, our work needs to be funded, and so I think that's something that's easy that they can do, particularly those of us who have our funds at a community foundation. So we can have some conversations around either particular programming that could be funded or just capacity for our giving circles. I think also allowing us to be a thought partner with them as they continue to deploy funds into our communities. I actually had a conversation with the head of a corporate foundation earlier this week, and I was mentioning some of the Black-led organizations. She was like, I've never even heard of these organizations, which was something. But the flip side was, she was like, and none of these organizations have ever asked me for money, which is like mind-blowing to me. So I think what we can do on our side is to make sure we're engaging with our organizations and point them in the direction of where these pots of money are, and then come alongside with maybe some technical assistance and some capacity building to help them much more successfully draw down those funds and then redeploy them in the communities that we love and care about.
Awesome. Anybody else on the panel? Because I echo that 100% from my work with Giving Circles.
Yeah.
Cut the check. Anthony said it.
Yeah, I agree. Terry, if I could briefly go back to your previous question. We were talking about stress and healing, and I just wanted to bring home a point, because we often look at our previous generation of African or African American people, Black people, and say, like during civil rights and during slavery, and say, how did they do that? Like, I could not have lived during that time. And we often talk about trauma and how trauma is passed from generation to generation. Well, the ability to deal with and overcome that trauma is also in our DNA. And so I know for myself, I'm a descendant of slaves. Like, I can trace my family back to the plantation. And so I'm like dealing with this stress and like working on my mental health during these times so that future generations can be in a space to better thrive, right? And so even going back to what Anthony is saying and Isaac is saying about cutting that check, it's so important, and it's due, right? It is not something that we can continue to kind of just sit back in the background and wait for. It's something that we have to go get and demand in this time, especially as the interest convergence is with us. Like, we have to capitalize on this moment. We're disrupting 238 years of wealth inequality and a wealth gap, right? We don't have the time to waste.
Yeah. And, I just, go ahead.
I was going to add, Terry, that the check is important, but we can't let them off the hook with just the check, because what will happen is that they'll write the check and then their conscience is, then they're okay. And I think if you're going to sustain something, and the real change, because what happens is you cut the check and then you go out and do something else, or it's okay for a moment and then something else happens. So, but how the change occurs is that they are engaged also. We learn that when we talk about, right, the folks that we help provide our dollars for. When we support them, we can give them a check, but we're trying to help them learn what we know so that they can be impactful even more in their community. So they use our dollars to do that, anyone that we provide grants for. But if we walk along with them, they be invested with us and in the cause. And I think that's what we want to have happen as well.
Yeah, and Terry, if I can, just real quick, I didn't get a chance to.
I wanted to get through, so I'm sorry. I just want to go on to make sure that we get a chance to at least answer most of these questions. But Isaac, someone asked a question about what is compassion fatigue, and I know you utilized that conversation in the conversation.
Yes, I'm being academic, but it's essentially, an individual whose heart drives them to want to give back and support suffering that they see in their community or in their environment, and then eventually they become worn down by that. So when you have compassion, it often leads you to respond to suffering that you see, but you may do so in a way that causes you to become fatigued. And the reason I mentioned it is, as I said, for myself and other leaders in the community in Nashville, we put in a lot of work, but we also wore ourselves out doing it. We're very compassionate people, but you can work on these issues in a way where you just are exhausted and you've made just a little bit of progress. So that's essentially what compassion fatigue is. And if you, try to find ways to work smarter, not harder, you can avoid it.
Thank you. Hopefully that answered the question for the person that presented it. There are about 3 more questions, and I know that we're running down on time before the top of the hour, so I want to just run through them really quickly. For whoever can answer this best, how do you find Black-led organizations in your community? Anybody have suggestions on sharing how in your community?
Yeah, my answer to that is, if you're a giving circle or you have a relationship with your community foundation or your host foundation, you can definitely leverage their staff and workforce to go out and do research and find those organizations if you're having a hard time finding them. But most of the time, really your members can, we did a grant cycle where we had each member recommend a Black-led or Black-serving organization in our community. And that produced over 30 organizations. And so that's always been an effective strategy for us.
Okay. And the next question was, how are you making sure you're providing support to the correct organizations at this moment, and how is that decision made? I'm just going to go ahead and answer that personally or from our work in this space. There's that calculated risk that's going to happen with every investment that you make as either a giving circle or as an individual. You're making it with the expectation of a certain outcome. So if you've done your research to understand what the work of that either nonprofit, individual, for-profit with a social responsibility, whatever the organization or entity is, it becomes that research on you for the product or outcome that you're looking for, that you make that decision or investment in. So as you and your giving circle come together and make those dollars available for a nonprofit that's doing work to support the lives of African American youth ages 16 to 22 in your community, you hold them accountable for what they've claimed that they were going to do or what they've made the request of your grant dollars for. And how is that decision made? It's typically within a giving circle made by vote of or by decision of the giving circle, whatever their voting criteria might be. The next question was, and I just want to make sure that I'm either getting these in, and I do actually see that Brandon was able to join us. I do want to give you a welcome and say welcome to, and I do want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. So if you can just take a moment, let us know who you are and where you represent from Denver.
Good afternoon, everybody, and my apologies for being very tardy on the call. I was on the call and messaging Miss Marsha and trying to figure out how I could actually get my webcam and all that to work, but we got it together. And thank you to my brother Javon for jumping in for me last minute. He is a previous DAAP chair, so I couldn't think of anybody, if not better, but exceptionally better than myself to represent us. But to do what you instructed or asked, my name is Brandon Bruce. I'm from Denver, Colorado. I am now one of the co-chairs of the Denver African American Philanthropists, and I'm really proud to hold this position. My other co-chair is Mr. Haroon Cowens.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. And I do look forward to hearing and seeing the work from DAAP in the days and months to come. There was one last question, and I want Anthony to take a look at it or answer it. Are any circles funding organizations engaged with policy or advocacy work, or are they using their voices in this manner? If you could address that.
I would certainly hope so. I know the Birmingham Change Fund and really through Marsha and the work of the Community Investment Network, I know we've been partnering with a Alabama-based organization called Woke Vote. And so Woke Vote has been doing advocacy around getting people to register to vote and turn out to voting, because we know that that's going to be a huge issue going forward. So partnering with organizations like that, I think, is hugely important. So I can only speak to my organization, but I'm sure other organizations are doing similar work.
Awesome, thank you. And I know that we only have like 3 minutes left, so I wanted to ask all the panelists, first of all, thank you so much for joining us again. If I get you to stand up, say cheese, look at the camera. We do want our assistants to get a screenshot of us so that we can canonize this moment. Professional Black men speaking about the things that are on their hearts and leading their communities. So Angela, if you could let us know when you're ready. Okay, it looks like if she didn't get it, I know somebody did, because I saw some flashes on my screen for the webinar. So thank you again for your participation today and your voices. I cannot say how much I appreciate hearing what each of you are doing in your communities and what each of you are doing personally, and then also what is motivating you, because I think hearing what's motivating you is also a testament to what can help motivate us in those moments that we may or may not be able to find that motivation for ourselves. So I am going to turn this back over to Marsha, and whoever that wonderful child's voice is, we thank you for joining us as well.
That was my grandbaby, but happy Father's Day to everybody.
Happy Father's Day,
Pop.
Pop.
Aww. Thank you so much. Marsha?
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much. We are so appreciative of having Terry moderate the panel, as well as being joined by Jason, Isaac, Brandon, Ken, Anthony, as well as Javon. You know, when we think of what we are hearing in this current environment, this day and age, I think that to be able to see you all doing excellent work in your communities, lifting your voices, and using your platforms in so many intentional and strategic ways is phenomenal. And so I cannot think of a better way to commemorate and celebrate Juneteenth than with having each of you all here with us today. So thank you again for sharing your time, your talent, and your treasure if you would like to make a donation to the Community Investment Network on this day. So thank you. All right, with that, we've already done the acknowledgements. We do have a few announcements. Number one, earlier this year in March, the Community Investment Network launched CIN Cares, which is a rapid relief fund. We want to remind all of our Giving Circle members that their Giving Circles are eligible to receive matching funds for any of the grants that they have or plan to make in their communities. We also will have additional webinars this summer, and so we'll share more information with you about those shortly. We have had an excellent two-part webinar series with Philanthropy Together that recently wrapped up. If you have not had a chance to view those webinars, we will send them out to our entire network, as well as provide you with an opportunity to join the communities of practice that Philanthropy Together and CIN will be launching to deal with racial equity. And although we are an organization led by people of color and comprised of people of color, there are still some things that we can learn, as well as an opportunity to share what we do know with others. So I encourage you all to join the community of practice that we'll be hosting with Philanthropy Together. Also, please be mindful of the Fatherhood Engagement series that has been taking place every Friday. It's been hosted by ALOT. That's a phenomenal series, and information about registering for the series is on CIN's website, as well as our social media pages. In addition, please be mindful of the upcoming opportunities to learn and grow more. Next Friday, we'll have Dr. Aisha Russo, who is a member of SPIN out of Denver, share more information with us about dealing with repeat trauma. And you may have heard the term racial battle fatigue. We'll be digging deep into that topic and that discussion to understand, number one, what's the negative impact systemically on communities of color as it relates to mental health, and how can we also protect our mental health in this season. Also, on July 9th, we will feature the Denver Foundation, Porus Foundation, and Co-op Foundation in a manner to say how are foundations, various foundations, private and public and family-based, how are they responding to the needs of the community in this season, in this time? How are they addressing their grantees' needs, their community needs? How are they being flexible? Have they shifted any of their initiatives? How are they just choosing to respond? And so I think that this conversation is not only timely, but it amplifies the work they're doing, but it's also a reminder of how we as Giving Circles can also think of partnerships with these institutions, as well as model or share how we are providing our grantees with opportunities to be resilient and sustained during this current time. And so with that, once again, thank you all for joining us today. Terry, Jason, Isaac, Ken, Brandon, Anthony, and Javon, you are phenomenal. Continue doing great work in your communities. We appreciate your time, and we do not take you for granted. That concludes today's webinar.
Thank you all again so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody have a good weekend.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, take care. Happy Father's Day.
You too.